Hello and welcome back to our lectures on Chaman Nahal's Azadi. The previous lecture was on the various themes related to the novel Azadi. I discussed at length the theme of homelessness, the theme of the loss of home, and the idea of refugee. I discussed all of this. This was the first theme that I discussed in the previous lecture. The second theme that I discussed was the idea of violence. How violence is one of the major themes in the novel and perhaps in all of partition literature. Right? Then the third theme for the day, and I'll be taking up two themes simultaneously now, is firstly the government inability and the ill preparedness of the local administration in handling the problems related to the partition of India. And the fourth one will be the theme of hope and despair, because that is what independence and the partition together gave us. Independence gave us hope, but the partition gave us despair. So I welcome you all once again to this lecture. My name is Piyush Chaudhary. I'm an assistant professor at the Department of English at Hansraj College. Thank you for joining in, and let us now go to the first theme of the day, which is theme number 3, and that is the government inability and the lack of the administrative will and the administrative inefficiency, I would say. So, since Azadi, it's a very realistic account of what happened during the partition, what people faced in and around the partition. Therefore, it also shows the lack of the government effort and, the lack of preparedness, I would say, preparedness on the part of the government, including the governments of Punjab at that point of time, including the government, the British government, as well as the local leaders. So everyone was ill prepared. So this was a tragedy of such mammoth proportions that virtually any government would have been ill prepared, to handle the stress, to handle the unimaginable and the huge amount of people that were involved. Millions of people were involved, crossing both sides of the border, crossing from the areas which are now in Pakistan over to Hindustan, and even the Muslims going from Hindustan over to Pakistan. Right? So one of the foremost failures of partition was, one of the foremost failures of this entire idea of partition was, the ill preparedness of the newly formed government of India at that point of time. And the problem, the main problem was that the British themselves did not take away the responsibility of safeguarding the nation that they have been looting for over 200 years. I mean, it's really tragic to know and to see how things unraveled, during the last 1 year of the partition of India and the last 1 year of the British Raj. How the British, who were here to rule us, who were here on their so-called mission to, to civilize us, on their so-called mission to civilize us, they believe that they are superior to us and that they should civilize us. So the British, who were considering themselves as the, as the sole spokesperson of all the civilizations of the world, they very conveniently forgot that India was the oldest civilization and the most civilized civilization. But that's a different thing. Perhaps we'll discuss on that particular aspect on some other day, at our YouTube channel. But it was the British who thought, that they are the owners of India, and they were the ones who abdicated all sense of responsibility towards the end of 1947. So the government apathy, the government inability, the administration's ill preparedness, I would say, was also exacerbated by the hurried exit of the British from India, right? So they passed on the reins of power to India and Pakistan, and they did not deliberately put in any effort to create peace and harmony or even to prevent the ongoing riots. They took some efforts, but they were very sporadic and they were very notional. They were very surface-like, efforts. So, of course, they were the largest army. They had in command thousands and thousands of troops, but we can see that the British very conveniently slipped away from the scene by first creating the mess and then simply abdicating any sense of responsibility or moral responsibility in trying to solve that mess, right? So, and also, it was also, the ideas of Muhammad Ali Jinnah and the Muslim League and the idea of the Direct Action Day also created the major part of the unrest were created by these two figures only. So there was a general lack of sympathy and lack of assistance from the Britishers because they were running away from the responsibility and they shrugged off their responsibility of maintaining peace and order, right after the partition, So they did not try to make, anything better or to lessen the amount of unrest between the two communities, right? So they simply abdicated their responsibility. Now, next is the idea that even Kanshiram, he's disillusioned of the British government. If you remember, in the opening first few chapters of the novel, Kanshiram is highly, he is very much motivated by the ideals of the British. He is in awe. He is in awe of the British Raj. He admires the British Raj, but then slowly and slowly he also realizes that the British are simply, giving up their responsibility. If you remember the character of Mr. Bill Davidson, who was also a member in the British Army, he also very conveniently said that the British is simply running away. So even the Britishers knew that they were running away because nobody wanted to be in that mess. None of the Britishers rather, wanted to be in a seat of responsibility and in a seat of, they just wanted the privileges which were associated by ruling India, but they did not want to, they did not want to be responsible for the mayhem that is being caused, and hence they simply just exited, right? So they were here as foreigners, they were here as colonialists, but this Lala Kanshiram understands very late, okay, by the time it's too late. And all of this, all of what I just said is very historically, it's historically very accurate. It's a very accurate analysis of the British inability to assist India, in controlling the riots, at a place where they had ruled for over 200 years, right? So otherwise, if only the British could have played a slightly better responsible role, the huge amount of tragedy that actually fell on the Punjabis and the Bengalis, that amount of tragedy could have been lessened to a great extent. I'm not saying, that it would have been completely stopped, but that tragedy could have been lessened to a great extent, right? And so the British did not support and did not, coordinate with the Indian and the Pakistani government to save the situation. So, right. So even the Indian government was miserably, helpless and did not do much in ensuring that the citizens are able to cross the borders in the novel. We see in the second part of the novel when, the Indian government and the various leaders asked people to stay where they were, but they simply gave hollow speeches and nothing really happened. Even and if people were to listen to these speeches by the Indian leaders of staying where they were, they would have been simply killed, right? So all of these were hollow speeches and nothing substantial or nothing solid was done on the ground to prevent the atrocities on the Punjabis, right, in the area of Punjab at that point of time. Next, even the amount of army that the foot convoy from Sialkot to Delhi receives is very less. As we know, this convoy went on for miles and there were several hundreds of units, they were walking together. So it was like a serpent which is walking, large convoys extending up to miles of people walking from Sialkot to India. But the amount of army people that they got were very less, right? As we know, Lala Kanshiram was, in charge of the 4th unit. But these units did not even realize that the units walking in front of them or the units walking at the back, they were attacked by the Muslim mob in close collusion with the Pakistani army, right? So there have been instances in this novel where Chaman Nahal is showing these things, right? So the amount of army men that we got, they were very inadequate, right? For millions of people, there were just a few hundred army men, right? Which was very, very less, right? And therefore this major theme that I have taken up is the lack of government preparedness, right? The inadequacy of the army also, they were also helpless, right? Sometimes unit 2 was attacked, sometimes unit 3 was attacked, and then the last unit in the long convoy was attacked, and therefore despite the presence of the army, violence actually occurred. So you see, it's a very apocalyptic state that despite the army men being there, you know it's virtually impossible to for just a few handful of army men to save lakhs of people. It's unimaginable. So this was the level of the ill preparedness. The administration, the government, the newly formed government was also ill prepared, unfortunately, right? The government machinery was completely ill equipped to handle such a difficult situation of unimaginable proportions, such as the partition of India, right? And also, the partition of the country was a decision which was taken without consulting the real stakeholders, The Punjabis were not consulted. The ones who were to be affected, they were not consulted. So it's like a complete loss of logic and common sense that actually ran amok in those times. So this was the level of the tragedy. So due to all these factors, the party and also the partition of the country was taken in a haste. It was taken as a very quick decision in the last few months only, right, because as per Muhammad Ali Jinnah, as per the direct action day, the DAD, which I've also explained at length in the previous lecture. You can watch that lecture. The DAD, the direct action day, actually created more unrest because Muhammad Ali Jinnah had clearly, along with Liaquat Ali Khan, he had clearly mentioned that you have to kill in order to take Pakistan, right? So even if that means killing the other people, and that means killing the Hindus and killing the Sikhs of the Punjab area, the Muslims were willing to do so, because the innocent Muslims of that time, they were duped. They were duped by giving them a hollow slogan of Pakistan by Muhammad Ali Jinnah and people like Liaquat Ali Khan, of course, right? So everything happened in such haste, so fast, that the government was completely, caught at crossroads. The people were caught at crossroads. The administration was ill prepared, and therefore the tragedy increased exponentially. And what could have been a lesser tragedy, therefore became one of the greatest, one of the greatest and one of the most problematic and one of the largest migrations, of humankind, which happened in 1947, right, based on religion. So these people, these millions of people, for no mistake of theirs, was simply pushed away from their home, and then they had to survive the onslaught somehow to cross over to the border, right? And therefore, I have, many critics have also mentioned that it is one of the greatest geopolitical tragedies of the 20th century. That is unfortunately the partition of India. So that is the third unit, where I discussed how the government was ill prepared. And there are many instances in the novel. I have taken these instances right from the novel itself. Okay, so let me now come to the next theme. The next theme, as you can see, it's hope and despair. So the idea of hope versus despair, right? So I would say that all literature, all literature means giving voice to the people, giving voice to human emotions, giving voice to unheard and unspeakable and unsaid human emotions. That's what Sahitya is, that's what literature is. So the novel Azadi, through its narrative, shows how, you know, uh, how people were hopeful, but at the same time, they had to go through despair as well. So the theme of hope and despair is firstly, most evidently visible in the character of Kanshiram himself. We see how in the beginning he's very hopeful, he's very positive about the British, but then later on he realizes that the British also is simply running away. So step by step, slowly and slowly, from chapter number 1 till the end, till the last chapter of the novel, we see how Lala Kanshiram's hopes are completely thwarted, and completely his hopes are being thwarted, and he's being disillusioned. He's being disillusioned of the rosy picture. He even at once believed, and not just Kanshiram. Kanshiram represents all the people, of Punjab area. They believe that Gandhi will save partition, but that does not happen. They believe that Nehru will save partition, but that does not happen. And then people like Kanshiram, who were too fond of the British, they believed that the British will save partition, but that did not happen. They believed that at least people will save them, at least their own neighbors, their own Muslim neighbors will save them, but that did not happen. Similarly, the Muslims here, they believed that their Hindu friends will save them, but the amount of enmity, the amount of you can say the poison had seeped in so deep after the direct action day that it was virtually impossible to control these violent human emotions, right? So the hopes were thwarted one after the other. Kanshiram believed that Pakistan will not be created, and when he realizes that, he believed, and in fact Kanshiram was so naive that he even believed that he will be able to come back to Sialkot after some months, and then he will be able to take back his property. And it's not just Kanshiram. There are several instances, there are several oral narratives, in the public domain, which clearly have said that many people believed that after the partition, good sense will prevail over the two governments, and that the idea of India and Pakistan, once again, India and Pakistan will come together, and it will be a Hindustan, and there will be no sense of Pakistan. And even if there is, people will be able to go back to their old homes, and then they'll be able to reclaim their property. But has it happened? Has it happened even today in 2025? It has not, right? So Kanshiram was naive, or you can say, he was a bit inexperienced, or perhaps he was fatally hopeful, I would say. he was fatally hopeful of the fact that he will be able to go back to Sialkot to reclaim his property, but that does not happen. When he realizes that he will not be able to come back to Sialkot, he is hopeful that he will be able to find a good future in Delhi. And then later on, this hope also is shattered. He's what is Kanshiram doing? The big owner. Lala was basically a title which was given to this trader, right? So he used to wear a pagdi, he used to wear a turban. But in Delhi, the great trader of Sialkot, who used to sell anaj, who used to sell grains, who used to sell groceries, and he had a big shop in Sialkot. Now he has come to Kingsway camp in Delhi, and he is simply selling some basic groceries on a wooden crate on the roads. So you see the huge reversal of fortunes which happened, right, due to the partition. So a rich Lala now simply becomes Kanshiram. So in Delhi, he is no more Lala Kanshiram. In Delhi, he becomes just Kanshiram. He remains just Kanshiram. He just remains an ordinary person, a poor person who lost his life, who lost his home, who lost his own daughter, who lost his son-in-law, who lost his family, who lost his house, who lost even his own dignity. Right? So the removal of turban in the end represents the loss of his dignity. So that's a very important trope in this novel. Right? So one by one his hopes are shattered, and all his hopes turn into despair. So he's very highly hopeful in the beginning, but later on he is completely hopeless. However, in the character of Arun, there is a certain sense of realism, because he is not an idealist like his father Lala Kanshiram. Right? Since the very beginning, Arun knew that Pakistan will be created, and when it is finally decided on the 3rd of June 1947, he is the first one to urge everyone to leave, because he knows that things will be problematic. That is the theme of hope and despair. It's not just about Lala Kanshiram or Arun. These Lala Kanshiram and his hopes, his big hopes, represent the hopes of the millions of people. So it's not just Lala Kanshiram, but it's about the millions of people who lived on both sides of the border. So the Hindus who migrated one day believed that they'll be able to go back to Pakistan to reclaim their property. The Muslims who migrated believed that they'll be able to go back to the eastern part of Punjab, to the Indian part of Punjab, and they'll be able to take back their property. But that does not really happen, and it has never happened, and perhaps it doesn't seem to ever happen in the near future ever as well. Right? So it turned into a permanent loss of home, life, and dignity for these characters. So therefore, the theme of hope and despair, the theme is very vividly portrayed by the author Chaman Nahal. Right? So it's also one of the central themes in the novel, predominantly through the character of Lala Kanshiram, but also it represents Chaman Nahal is representing this hope in all the characters, and Chaman Nahal is representing this thwarted hope in the millions of people who were alive at that tragic point of time. So that is the end of this lecture. These were some of the major 4 themes that I have taken up. In the previous lecture, I'll be sharing the link, and you can find those lectures in the playlist. I'll be creating a playlist. You can look at the previous lectures for all those points and all those aspects. So these were the major themes. Up next, in the next subsequent lectures, I'll be taking up a detailed character analysis. So most of the major characters, firstly the protagonist Lala Kanshiram, then his son Arun, Bibi Amarvati, Gangumal, and we have a whole plethora of characters that are there in this novel. I'll be taking up the character analysis in the subsequent editions. So please stay with me. Stay tuned for more lectures at Hansraj e-Samvaad. Thank you so much. I'll take your leave, and I'll come up with the character analysis very soon in the subsequent lectures. Till then, keep watching Hansraj e-Samvaad, keep reading the novel. Jai Hind and goodbye for now.